Я приветствую вас, дорогие
Hello
друзья,
dear
уважаемые
viewers,
гости.
guests and subscribers to my channel. Thank you very much for following us and expecting our meetings with Alexey Arestovich. We are in parallel, also streaming on his channel. Hello Alexey. Good evening to your house. Oh, that's quite an interesting mood that you have today. We're facing a ton of different events happening around the world. We can see the falsities and the inclinations of different leaders. People are watching everything on the screens of their gadgets and trying to understand what's happening in the White House, what's happening in Moscow, what is happening in Kiev. Zelensky came over, he has met with Trump, indicated a couple photo opportunities for the press, and then they went into a more closed meeting, and Trump, as the owner of the house and owner of this process, basically said that Russia agrees on certain terms, so let's discuss what and who is going to do. And we can talk more today about the details of these suggestions. We can talk more about the way that visitors looked, European leaders looked, while visiting Trump's White House. And one thing before we deep dive there, do not forget to click like and subscribe buttons. And it would be nice if you can leave a good comment there at the bottom. That also helps the algorithm. If you want to ask a question, you can post it under the stream. We will try to address them at the end of the show. Side note from Privateer Station, we usually do not translate that part of a stream, so if you want to see questions and answers, you may want to try to listen to the original in Russian with auto-generated subtitles, if that helps. So let's start today's stream with a question. Today's question is, whom Zelensky is afraid more of? Trump, Putin, MI6 and Brits, or radicals inside Ukraine? These are the options. They are not connected to the top event that we'll be addressing today. So how would you answer this question, Alexei? Of course, Alexander, he is mostly scared by the radicals in Ukraine. Trump and MI6 are not too much of a threat for him. He thinks he has been playing them and he'll play them again. But radicals in Ukraine, that's definitely a concern. That's why you can see in the stream of his awards that he was giving out and certain appointments, you can see that he is toying with these radical powers. These would be the ones who will bring his butt to the frying pan eventually, sooner or later. Alright guys, please vote under the stream. We will be looking at this question a bit later. But it appears that Zelensky is still somewhat afraid of Trump because he behaved in the Oval Office this time. What impression did it produce on you, Alexei? Oval Office 2-0. What do you think about Zelensky's outlook, his dress, his ideas that he brought in? Alexander, I could care less about what he was wearing. I only care about the core concept of these events. And the core of what is happening in the White House is that responsibility is being placed on the shoulders of Zelensky and European leaders. And this is way more important than many other aspects of this meeting. Look, the main question today is how quickly will America start dwindling its help? Europeans are incapable, in big capital cursive letters, incapable to supply the right level of military support to Ukraine to continue holding the front even on the current level, or basically what it amounts to a slow sliding down to the abyss. Europe most likely will be capable to supply enough for Ukraine to either jump straight into the abyss or do it in a series of leaps. And if you watch the media after the meeting, Ukrainian media is saying that, cheering that support from the United States will not disappear. White House, in the meantime, is saying if there is no deal, there is no support. We are looking at the most tragic segment of this very tragic story. 99.9% American aid will be dwindling, and that means two significant lines of problems for Ukraine. First, on the front, second, in the rear. And not only military issues. Most likely on the rear part it'll be the economy of the country. Zelensky already voiced that Ukraine is facing a significant budget deficit for the next year. And I think very soon he will be mostly afraid of pensioners in Ukraine, retirees, because they already are coming out to streets in different parts of the country where they are not being paid. There was recently a piece of news about Sumy, where government is already delaying their payments of pensions to the retirees living in that district. And what was Zelensky wearing, whether he was cleaning his nose or not, while in the White House, that's not so important. Alexei, let's take a look at more details of this situation. During the last 24 hours, I have not seen so much positive events any time in the recent history, like in the last day. Syridenko is raising salaries for doctors. They're also saying that they'll let the 22-year-olds leave the country if they need to study or visit families. Ukraine announced that 5,000 hryvnias will be given to the family of each first grader who starts his school this year. You're saying there is a big hole in the budget of 40 billion hryvnias for the next year. Marchenko comes out and says that, don't worry, we already found 35, we're missing maybe 10. We will find it, we will continue fighting, and everything is great. And they showed the Flamingo missile supposedly flying 3,000 kilometers somewhere, a medium-range ballistic missile. So people come down, TV marathon in Ukraine continues with its propaganda, everything is peachy and topsy-turvy. Well, Alexander, what else do you think they want to say? We screwed everything up, and now it's all going to be said? They're just repeating the same things that Nazi Germany propaganda did about February, March of 1945. Today, somebody even posted an excerpt from the German newspapers of those times that they were building new ballistic missile. Same thing as we're doing now, and economic developments and other things. So all these elements, they're not worthy of discussion, seriously. This is just dressing of the Potemkin village. So, okay, Alexei, what is important, I think, here is the mood. European leaders came out to the photo op, and this is how they were pictured. Stubb and the others, they look very grim. I don't know if that's the moment that photographer got, but otherwise the mood is very concerning in the room. Only Mertz is somewhat smiling to somebody off camera. So they all look seriously concerned. Macron and Meloni, their faces are also very serious and expressing some inner conflict. So I want to discuss that in the light of what Zelensky has mentioned. He, of course, thanked everybody after the meeting. He said that we had the best conversation with Trump since forever, and he thanked Melania Trump for her reception, and he is looking forward to continuous meetings, including Putin and Trump, and he showed the details of front activities to Trump. What was interesting, the map was also presented in the Oval Office. A lot of them were paying attention to it. But what's interesting, that map has percentage. It says how many percentage of each district does each side hold. And I did not quite understand, maybe you can unpack it for us, the topic of transfer of territory. We understood that we do not need a ceasefire separately, there'll be a peace deal, all-inclusive. But speaking of territory, what should we look at here, Alexei? Listen, Alexander, this is all about the big duck that is being shoved in the oven already. All these percent elements, the mentions of Melania Trump and overall warm reception. Zelensky and Trump look very much alike in certain elements. Wherever they are, there is victory. It's just that somehow, sometimes things don't work out. The faces of Europeans are very telling, unlike all these speeches. And they're saying the certain things that these people from Europe, these leaders from European countries who were hoping to ride on the backs of the United States and who were singing asanas about the undestructiveness of international borders, that they will be supportive of Ukraine. Now they're understanding that they need to start helping Ukraine with arms, with money, and with intel. Financially, I think EU might find some money, although we have to remember that there is Fico, there is Orban, and governments in 9 more countries who might lean more right than currently. And as we remember, there were attempts to give more money to Ukraine this year, which have not fared well. The main part for Ukraine is military supply, military support. And they already see the perspective. Ukraine is going to lose in some reasonable time frame without military support. And they will be the ones to blame. Because Trump made it clear that all might of his propaganda machine in the United States and his personal Twitter will be now explaining why United States has almost strike a peace with participants of this war, and it's Europeans who are resisting. So for them, it implies very significant consequences, both personal and political. That's why their expressions of their faces are much more telling than Zelensky's suit and his words about the message from Melania. Alexey, I found one more thing that I want to share, because that's happening as we're recording now. Europeans and Trump have gathered together, and Trump took a word and said that they'll be discussing the current front line, and said that we will strive to come to agreement on all matters, including security for Ukraine. And I understand this is the insight from the Oval Office that is being discussed when the press has already left, apparently. But this is the picture, last picture that they snapped before being ushered outside the office. Here you can see Zelensky and Trump talking in front of the map of Ukraine, and Trump, with a very serious impression, is delivering some message to Zelensky, who looks a bit scared and somewhat trying to look smaller than he is. So one can say that Trump is explaining to him what will happen on the front and which territories will go where. I may be speculating, but there are some publications now that Donetsky district is going to Russia in its entirety, and Russia in exchange will withdraw from some other districts. So that's what likely is on the table. Alexander, what does it mean Trump agreed to? He can agree to anything. He cannot give an order to Ukrainian troops to withdraw from a district. Only Zelensky can, and Zelensky will never give such an order. Why? Because that implies his political death, with all the consequences stemming out of it. He will never go for it. Therefore, Trump is facing a very simple dilemma. He now understands how to play this situation. He is about to leave European leaders and Zelensky and put a big label on this conflict, that this is a regional conflict, and I have a much more appealing arc of a storyline above this conflict with Vladimir Putin, where we can start mining for natural resources in the Arctic. This is the day when he dumps responsibility for this conflict. And basically he's saying that, if you read it correctly, I have made an agreement. We have solved all issues. We have no problems on this list. It is just for you, Europeans, to accept it. And if you do not want to accept it, then it is your fault. And your responsibility. Alexei, on one hand, I love the streams like today's, because right now, by the way, there is a statement from Macron going viral that we all rely on Trump. We hope for his support in regards of Europe and Ukraine. So they came there looking for American support, and looks like Trump is not going for this, not falling for this. Europeans, Alexander, European leaders of today are very elegant diplomats, just like the mosquito's dick. Because from their point of view, the deadly fight with Putin, with a break for lunch, looks like this. We are saying the right words. Trump is paying, giving military supplies to Ukraine, and Ukraine is fighting. If Ukraine fails, that's because America did not supply enough or Ukraine did something wrong. And if Ukraine prevails, then it is us, wise European leaders, who have done it. And here they see Trump, like that editor of the Korn movie, leaving the set and saying, you know what, you can F the way you like, I don't give a damn. Right? So there is a funny phrase in Russian language, which can be translated into English as single ball twins, one ball for two. So here we have one ball for maybe all of the European leaders. Thank you, Alexey. I appreciate the colorful picture, and dear viewers, if you have any commentary to that, please do. Trump did not recognize Tuba, looking at him and the meeting, and said, "You are a mighty and young man." And Stubb, when he had his word, said that we found a solution in 1945, and I'm sure we'll find a solution in 2025 to end Russian aggressive war. Oh yeah, I love Brits in this regard too, Alexander. They are breaking everything you can imagine with their army worth of 74,000 troops, which is less than half of what Russians have on just one segment of the front, with fleeing of billionaires, with big social issues in Britain, with issues of freedom of speech. They're also still trying to run the world with their tail or back leg or something, because how come the world should be listening to us? You all learned at school that Britain rules the seas, right? How come we don't rule? Macron, you need to provide some support here. And Macron comes out and says, yeah, we do all expect America to be a strong ally. Well, it's a comic situation. You know, personally, myself, my concerns about the quality of European leaders were growing incrementally. 2.5 years ago, I understood something, and that's when I changed my opinion about a lot of things in this war. And today we're seeing the culmination of it. We're being accused here that we often appease or praise Putin in our streams, and I have a very simple answer to that. Be strong. Set the goals that you can achieve and achieve those goals, and then we will praise you. What are we going to praise you otherwise for? Just for the words that are not supported by any deeds? Look, when North Korea is coming to aid of the ally, they're sending their troops. Their troops are defending some of the Russian border. What are Ukrainian allies doing? You're right, Alexei. They are probably having big meetings. Exactly, they're meeting with Zelensky, putting a phone on the table and expecting the call from Putin or Trump. Wondering probably whether they will call or not. And that's why Trump and Putin met in Alaska, demonstrating that the rest of the world cannot be at their table, does not have the right to be present at their table. All right, so we understand this meeting is happening, they are having dinner, giving more commentary. One more thing worth mentioning, that we are seeing some rather interesting events that preceded today's meeting. Russians are saying that Ukrainian drone reached the energy power plant of Smolensk nuclear power factory. Also, Putin's FSB supposedly discovered some explosives in one of the electric vehicles in one of the cities and evacuated that. On the Ukrainian side, UAV hit a multi-story building, a family died, 7 dead. You know, Alexander, I like how Ukrainian office Telegram channels published today's news, targeting a multi-story building in Kharkov by Russians. How do they know that it was a targeted hit on the multi-story building? Did they record the message sent to that UAV? You know, what bothers me most is not the suit of Zelensky or faces of European leaders, but reactions of my compatriots, because I am to live with my countrymen somehow. And I see that their brains have been hacked cognitively, and I hope it's not forever. But somebody would have to do something with Ukraine after this war is over. Big question how much of the country will be left at the end of the conflict. But among the demands for denazification and demilitarization, I think one more statement needs to be added that Ukrainians need to have their brains restored after this war. They're failing to analyze these basic things when the newspapers and government channels are publishing all that crap. And I have an interesting group of friends and contacts that I listen to, that reach out to me, and I only heard maybe a couple of people with bright minds. One of them was a military general who reached out and said, if you guys are saying that we need to continue war, come to the front and continue fighting, and join infantry. Not UAV, not drone operators, not communication people, not marketing and PR people, not the drafting commission. Go join the infantry in the trenches. And unfortunately, a lot of Ukrainian citizens in the country have lost their critical thinking. What has been done to their brain capacity by their power, by the West, by Russian propaganda, this is a tragedy. Hang on, Alexander, this is an important point I want to inject here. I want to argue with you, Alexei, here. Nobody came out to the protests that Leshchenko and Bezugla called for. Remember, they called, come to the embassy of the United States, this will help the president, write on the cardboards that we will never give in, we will not give up Donetsk district. Everybody understands nobody is going to come out. Yet they're still making publications that let's support our president regardless of what you think about him. He is representing our country. This is a decisive day for us. Everybody needs to come out in the street and support the president. But everybody understands also that this is just another lie and another PR stunt. So people are still skeptical to these messages. Alexei, please don't bury them all. Many of them do understand that there is a lot of fakery happening. Alexander, I'm not burying Ukrainians. I'm fighting for them as much as I can. And to the best of my ability, I'm fighting for their mental acuity and hoping that they will survive all that. Okay. Problem is, we do not see the normal Ukraine. We usually see the screaming Ukraine that posts 2 posts in 15 minutes. First of them says, let's surround Zelensky and support his visit in White House, and then 10 minutes or 15 minutes later, America doesn't matter, let's all go fight in Donbass. And these are the screaming messages that we need to somehow address and fight. Germany went through denazification after the war, and I'm afraid we'll have to do something like that with Ukraine after. Whatever term we use, recognitivization or restoration of normal information field that is completely destroyed with these events, because the pressure of the screaming masses also defines the choices that Zelensky is making. Do you think he's just letting the students go? He's letting the steam out so there would be no youth Maidan in the near future. He's letting them out so he would not have a protest group, because people with the cardboards below the age of 22, they go out without any fear, because drafting commission cannot grab them and they cannot be beaten, of course, so he needs to care for that somehow, and he's caring for his presidency by letting them out. He's not caring about the future of the country. Because remember all his rhetoric that we're not letting people out because of the demographic crisis? If we open the borders, the country will collapse, and all of a sudden he lets this group out. Look, there are different ways to think. There is a way to run around just reading the hype, reading the headlines. There is a deeper view when you go and strategize things. And that strategizing is completely gone from majority of Ukrainian thinking. So they would ask a question: why nobody is let out, and students all of a sudden are let go, are allowed to leave the country. If we are going into the new difficult phase of this war without American aid, why are we letting the 18 to 22 out? These are the best of the fighters, potentially. You need to probably prepare them and train them and have best of the soldiers. So what are we doing here? We are allowing them to study, or we are preventing the future Maidan and future protests so Zelensky could stay. Look, at just one simple contradiction you can see the logic of this power, where everything is heading and why. Okay, Alexei, let's think strategically further. So it turns out that if this plan is to work, and there'll be some remnants older than 22, so the only protest power against Zelensky would be the soldiers, right? Would be the ones who are getting drafted. Maybe also those who have left their detachments, those who fled the front. Those would be the powers that he'll have to deal with if everybody younger will leave. So do you think he will have enough power to deal with them? Oh, he's buying them. Look at the amount of articles, how brilliant Zelensky is, and how amazing he is and his troops are fighting. Look at Prokopenko Denis, who's getting the Order of Bogdan Khmelnytsky. Granted, he fought valiantly for something at the field, not truly taken the village yet back, but he already got the reward. Look at the head of the storm troops of Ukraine. We've devised a new kind of troops. This is the fellow also from the right sector who's leading it. And this is the answer to the question, whom is he afraid of? He didn't give an order to Trump, but he gave an order to Prokopenko. This is Yermak's strategy. He's trying to toy with these guys who will probably fry them just a few months away from now, whom they would be running away from, trying to cross that infamous Tisa River themselves soon. Okay, so we have a definite amount of the right wing in the country, right? The ones who are fighting, the ones who are very loud and active. But the army, majority of the army is not them. Most of the army, most of the mobilized, most of those who fled the detachments, they're the ones who are fed up with the prohibitions of Russian language, with the fact that they're being drafted and forced to fight. And they're also armed. Yes, they're less motivated. Yes, they're less prepared than some of those right battalions. They're less professional. It's kind of like Wehrmacht versus Waffen-SS, but they're just more in numbers. And the decisive word in reality will be with them. But with that part of the army, Zelensky is not toying at all. Why? He doesn't have enough brain. They don't understand how that works. They think that they have some experience of political technology, and they have some experience of political PR that they've been doing. So they think that they've discovered the main truth in this world, that you have to work with the loudest and most active people who can actually go for some political effort, and everything will be fantastic. But when your vessel is going through such a hard storm, you need to pay attention to the majority too. And majority is usually rather quiet till the very last moment. And Zelensky thinks that he can prevail by uniting with the most active. It's almost like feeding a hare to the pack of wolves. You never know whether they'll run after the hare or they'll jump at you, and most likely they'll target both. So when all these groups will try to get to power, they will have to navigate it somehow, supporting the right and also talking to the West to get additional financial and military support. That's why I'm thinking that Zelensky is already a thing of the past. His last name is not deciding anything in the future. We have to concentrate our vision on the future and who is going to run it. And it'll be a pretty entertaining time. All right, we will dive deeper into what can be in a few moments. Guys, do not forget to click the like button. We have over 40,000 watching live on Alexey's channel, about 25,000 watching on my channel, Alexander Shelest, and please, again, this does help us with YouTube. If you click the like and leave a comment, even if it's a brief one, that helps to promote this video to more eyeballs. And by the way, there were some issues recently with YouTube and Starlink in Ukraine. So, okay, I want to concentrate, Alexei, on the meetings. I want to seriously discuss the historic, how would I call it, the historic title of whether the meeting is historic or not. 28 minutes was Zelensky's meeting with Trump and European leaders. This was the open part. After that, all the journalists were asked to withdraw. And of course, they're smiling, everybody is shaking hands in front of the cameras. Who recognized whom? Zelensky talking that he showed some nuance to Trump and they're ready to make decisions. But what Trump said, the key points are: we will see whether we can get to peaceful regulation of the conflict in Ukraine in 2 to 3 weeks, right? Everybody started remembering Arestovych with his 2 to 3 weeks. Well, Trump says 1 to 2 weeks, actually. So, about half an hour, the closed part of the meeting was lasting, according to the media. And Trump meeting with Putin was for over 3 hours. Ukrainian channels that we mentioned earlier in today's stream, they're posting pictures where Zelensky is smiling, Trump is smiling, see how leaders are open and discussing it with each other, and all this grimacing at the end when their uncomfortable questions were asked, and when Trump said blatantly, there's not going to be any NATO, we're not going to extend military help, as Biden did, because this is a very corrupt story, the way it was done and used. So, which meeting do you think can be called a historic meeting? The one in Alaska or the one that was today? Okay, let's measure today's meeting, Alexander, that some people are calling historic. There were 10 people for half an hour. You have about 3 minutes per person. What do you think you can resolve? Or even during the 30-minute meeting, if one person is talking all the time. It's not even a discussion. Trump gathered them and explained to them what will happen and who will be guilty. Study Russian classics, the eternal questions. What's happening and who's to blame? They were just explained in much detail how it will be, and basically it concludes with, guys, you and Zelensky are the ones to dig through all that shit pile if you want to continue fighting on your own. So if to draw a parallel with Alaska, okay, on Alaska there were some things discussed and decisions being made. That's why 3 hours. Here they were just informed. So it's up to your taste which of the meetings do you want to label as historic. Well, all our fashionable speakers in Ukraine are saying that Zelensky is a historic meeting and historic point. You know, have you read an interesting book, Gone with the Wind? I visited the house that the author was describing in this book, Scarlett O'Hara's. And there are two nice grandmothers guiding the tour groups over this house. And they told us a legend, I don't know if that's true or just a city local legend, probably local citizens know it better, but where the name came from, Gone with the Wind. When the battle for Atlanta was happening, a lot of people died, of course, and when the battle was done, when the North has prevailed, a lot of soldiers came back. The problem was that the township was very wooden. There was wooden houses and a lot of trees, a lot of wooden structures. And Sherman was fighting rather cruelly, and he burnt that whole suburb of Atlanta. And that's what I heard. Don't know how realistically, historically it's connected. There were only 2 houses left after the fire. The whole, Brovary, the suburb of Kiev is gone. So no buildings are left. For one day, all the ashes are still there, and the next day, a strong wind came and took away even the ashes. So there was a town where they lived, loved, were raising kids, and they come back and there is nothing. It's just an empty field left, gone with the wind. So that's what one can draw a parallel. That all that happened since 91, that had a pinnacle in 2014 and is now going on with this war, I'm afraid everything will be gone. Nothing will matter soon. There's very little left. in the best option that Ukraine has. Maybe within a year and a half it'll be resolved, but in reality I think everything will be resolved within the next 6 to 9 months. What everything? This war. And Alexander, I think it'll be a very visual stomping of history over the opinions of those who are supportive or looking for that old Ukraine that was before this conflict. So you think Zelensky is being faced with the choice to leave, right? He doesn't have an option not to leave. Alexander, let's discuss it logically. For 3 hours, Trump and Putin were discussing this matter. Listen, also, an important point to mention here is that these leaders gather together when most of things are already agreed upon, when 90%, 95% of matters are being already regulated in pre-discussions. Yet they have another 3 hours to discuss the balance. Zelensky comes, he gets half an hour audience, European leaders get another half an hour. This is not a discussion, this is a statement that they were getting. Trump is resolving this matter from his perspective. And it just turns out that this matter is tied to Russia, and his opponents accuse him of defending some Russians' interests and being a traitor to the United States. No, he's actually defending the interests of the United States, as no one before him. And European leaders and Zelensky are preventing him from achieving a peace on this war. So, do you think he's the type of person who will say, okay, there is nothing I can do about it, or he will try to make an effort to realize his strategy and realize the certain goals that he discussed, that he took an effort to get from Putin? So, Alexei, there is a narrative being pushed that nothing can happen without Ukraine. Right, Alexander. We'll see very soon what Zelensky will do in the very near future. Even if he doesn't do anything special. And we take the lightest variant of the events when the support will be dwindling gradually. Just that will lead Zelensky to a very uncomfortable, to a very problematic future. First of all, from his soldiers. Unimportant whether they are the right sector or the ones who were captured by force by the drafting commission. And then there'll be youth protests, and however much you try to fund new school years and some supportive money for social matters, where do you get the money for that? That's another matter too. That will not help. And that's why I don't know whether these meetings were historic. I think historic events are going to unfold right now after these meetings. And the story will be rather sad, because Ukraine is likely to lose with a huge crash, when the events will be so horrible that people will be screaming from horror where Ukraine is sliding. And when they will be looking for the guilty parties, they will appoint Zelensky in his office. He is not the only one, though. All those who allowed to be deceived by this propaganda are just likely to blame, who allowed themselves to be dehumanized during the war. People here think that in Ukraine that it has no relation to that dehumanization has no relation to the level of support. No, it has definite relation to that. That's how you get monetary and military support from your allies. If you lose your ethics, you don't. War is a prosecutor, and it's already putting on the wig. Very soon it'll ask from all the guilty stuff. It won't be Arestovych talking here on YouTube, it'll be history making its demands. There is no easy exit out of this situation. Okay, let's take half a step back, Alexei. I think it's very important to look at too. The direct speech of Trump to all these attendees. He's saying that Putin wants to come to a deal for me. You may understand it any way you like. Maybe a little crazy, but Alexei, can you comment? What is that chemistry between Putin and Trump? That Trump is saying that Putin is eager to do some things for Trump. Okay, in orderly fashion here. Let's remember the story of southern Vietnam. The agreement of '63, where Kissinger signs, gets a Nobel Peace Prize. A lot of good things happen. They mark the border between northern and southern Vietnam. They freeze it along the front line. There are no withdrawals of anybody's troops. Everything much better than here. Exchange of prisoners of war. Everybody were exchanged for everybody. But, and the peace, suppose the world supposedly signed and agreed that both Vietnams, including people of South Vietnam, have the right to exist. But a year and 3 months later, northern Vietnam just demolishes southern Vietnam. And those historic pictures we all remember of people grasping at the helicopters when they're taking off. Later we saw that in Afghanistan. Agreement with Taliban, almost agreed about everything. They switch into offensive basically overnight, and Americans in a panic fashion leave, in a hasty fashion leave Afghanistan. People are passing their kids across the fences at the airport so they can have a chance at life in America, and then people are falling off the big cargo planes as they leave in Bagram airfield. And Americans in both cases are not exactly guilty, right? So Vietnam, the president got a Nobel Peace Prize. America signed a peace treaty. There was also Chiang Kai-shek in China. America was supporting the side of China against the communists. And then Truman refused to provide continuous support. So any peace deal now, if it does not lead to core changes in Ukrainian internal politics and external politics, so basically changing of productivity of the country, this will lead that in a year or two, Russian Federation, having freed itself from most of sanctions and accumulated more effort and participating a bit more in the internal squabble in Ukraine, will wait for a moment and then deliver a coup de grace to Ukraine and take a lot more than it did during this war. This thought is so obvious to me, it's difficult to grasp how so many people are missing it. So the ceasefire that will be for naught, or any peace agreement that they'll sign, they will not last likely. Even with the security guarantees, Alexei? Yes, even if right now somebody would come out on the Ukrainian side and say, we are joining NATO and tomorrow will be peace, it would not mean anything. Because this will still end like southern Vietnam. There is no other exit, as I see it. There's no other exit out of this situation. There's only one possible solution, that all these bold, efficient, and undecisive public would not go for. You need to change the productivity of the country. And unless you do that, Russia will come in and do that for you. America doesn't care much about Ukraine. And this productivity that Ukraine currently has doesn't need it twice. Trump is making a special operation on transferring the responsibility and washing his hands from this issue. And he is protecting the interests of America, not of Ukraine. Most Americans can't even point at Ukraine on the map. Ukraine is being told goodbye, and I have said that thousands of times, and I'll repeat it again. America has more reasons to have relations with Russia, even if Russia would have 100 times more bloodthirsty dictator than Putin. America definitely has more reasons to communicate with Russia than to deal with Ukraine. America has no natural interest in Ukraine, as I see it. Wait, Alexei, we're giving them our riches, right? Well, on American continent, including Alaska, by the way, and the northern fields, the northern shelves, there are a lot more resources. Just unlike that famous movie Kinzaza, the violin player is not needed. Europeans need us only in words. You could see that in their faces, how much are they ready to answer for their words. And you will see all this unfolding much sooner than you would expect. This is the tragedy of Ukraine, that nobody needs it. Period. And the second tragedy is that it allowed itself, people of Ukraine allowed themselves to believe in all these supportive words instead of looking at the situation soberly. That's why I see this as a pending catastrophe. It will not be Ukraine without 20% of territory. It likely will be worse. It will likely be very reminiscent of southern Vietnam with all the similar conclusions. Alexey, you're using the phrase that I picked from you.
Никакого личностного роста, мышления и коммуникации. QR-код, который возле Алексея Николаевича, приходите, интересуйтесь. Все, что как бы будет, уже есть. Я немножко отвлекусь, Алексей Николаевич.
Alexey, I want to use here a phrase, everything that will be already is, as you said many times. And we'll get back to strategic matters for the audience. I see a lot of questions coming from our audience. Some people are being very emotional, others asking significant details. I want you to comment on one more disaster. Recently, about 10 minutes ago, the head of our UAV detachments, UAV armed forces, Madar, his quote, "The oil pipe friendship is done with. It is fully destroyed by Ukraine. Russia is not pumping oil into Europe, and it is indefinitely for now." So I understand these are second matters. Main eyeballs are looking at Washington and what's happening there. But today there was an interesting, a very hard fight between Syarta and Sybiga. They were exchanging very harsh tweets. Hungary accused Ukraine. Sybiga answered something, provided Ukrainian point of view, and suggested them to complain in the Kremlin. And Syarta said, "Here I'll go through facts. Here's the contract. Here there are some responsibilities, and it's Hungarian economic security, energy security." And now apparently Madar is taking responsibility for destroying that oil pipeline. Everything that will be already is. We apparently have just destroyed the energy security of Hungary ourselves. Right. This likely will cause a lot of sympathy from Europe for Ukraine. I think Europe is currently buying worth of 25 billion euros of different oil derivative products, plastics and chemicals from Hungary, from this oil, right? So that's also rather symbolic that Madar, the head of our UAV troops, is Hungarian of ethnicity, but he's the one declaring that they've destroyed. My friend from military said that if you have no brain, you're disabled. So if you have blown it up, at least stay mum about it. Because now you're going to field all these questions from European leaders. What about our energy security? What, Nord Stream was not enough for you? This is already a second event of that caliber. Do you think that all helps to grow pro-Ukrainian interests in Europe? And Hungary now will go and vote to support Ukraine militarily and financially and with intel? The degree of insanity is so high that I sometimes do not believe that I'm not sleeping and actually watching it live. You know, it's difficult for smart people in this world. They live among the aquarium fish, but not among the one-celled organisms, I thought. I'm apparently living among the one-celled organisms, or I'm observing these tweets from them. And I'm going through a very complex feelings at the moment in this regard. Because even mom, who's telling her kid, do not play with scissors, do not play with scissors, eventually the kid still hurts himself with scissors and mom runs to pick the band-aid. She has some satisfaction in her voice that, well, I warned you about that, right? And I think all of the streams from now till New Year will likely contain a hefty bunch of my exclamation points saying, "I told you so." This is madness, pure madness. Alexei, I want to underline that this is an official, a military officer. Yeah, this is the Alexander. This is the commander of the armed forces branch. Military official of Ukraine, with his statement, affirms what we have done, and it seems like it could be treated as we declared war on Hungary. Right, that could be construed as one of the symbols of military aggression, if you bring it right under the international law. This event easily hits a couple out of those 18 articles that define the signs of aggression. Israel is when they bomb something, they always, in the news, you get that some unknown jets bombed something in Syria, right? They never put their names and all the details on it. While Ukrainians also add a card where you can send money to support the troops that have destroyed it. And then we jump for joy saying, yes, that's us. So, since September of 2023, I've been warning that this is where it goes to. And I have an endless patience, but I'm curious, how long will it take, even for the slowest ones, to understand that this is the vector? I think now we're entering the times when even this group of people will get it. So 2 years. That's pretty short in the historic time frame. End of the first hour.